dear ones, Allison Scammell here, and we are talking about surrender today. Surrender is a topic we could just explore infinitely and still be left with that feeling that we're only scratching the surface. And the thing that I really want to convey before we get into anything else is a really, really important aspect of spiritual growth and evolution. And spiritual growth and evolution is not about having it all figured out and never experiencing pain and avoiding all struggle and avoiding all painful situations. It's about how we respond to painful situations. That is the essence of spiritual growth, of evolution. It's responding to challenges from a higher vibrational place, not allowing painful situations to derail us. And so a huge part of that response, especially if we are in the midst of the pain and the chaos, is to know how to surrender. Because that's what usually we're being guided towards, is just surrender and not fighting it, not forcing it, not going into willpower, which is what we have relied on throughout human evolution, is to force situations, resist situations, hide from our pain, numb our pain, which I just recorded a whole episode about numbing. So if you haven't had a chance to check that one out, we'll leave it in the show notes. But for today, we're going to be talking about just how to surrender, and in a way that really gets you back into connection to that higher self so that you can be guided forward no matter what chaos may be happening in your outer world. So why don't we go ahead and get right to it. In today's episode, I reveal what a surrender experience is, when it's time to kick one off, and how they can help you maintain that connection to your higher self, to be divinely led even during times of chaos in your life. We'll end on an invitation that will have you elevating your ability to be led by the heart during both stable and uncertain times, so you can avoid that unnecessary worrying and stay in alignment to your truest path. So please, you're going to want to stay with me until the end. Hello, Soul Guide Circle. That is the name of this global and growing community of soul-guided leaders and entrepreneurs. In the Soul Guide Circle, we are using our spiritual gifts to grow prosperous, heart-led businesses that are on the leading edge of consciousness. Find a link to join our closed Facebook group at allisonscammell.com or in those show notes. So what is a surrender experiment? Well, let's start out with what is surrender. Surrender is purely saying, higher self, now what? Surrender is being surrendered to what wants to happen. It's being surrendered to the unfolding experience, being surrendered to the voice of your higher self. And surrender is much more easeful when everything in our life is going well and we're in this high vibey place and we're just in that constant connection to our heart and we're in this alignment and we're in flow, and it's a lot more easeful to surrender. I'll never say surrender is easy, because it's not. I mean, we're sort of wired not to surrender. We're wired to resist surrender and to try to have it figured all out, to calculate our next step, to research until we're blue in the face, and to consider every single option before we make the decision. And sometimes research is required. For some human design types, research is a way that you find your clarity. Certainly if you have a human design profile that is a 1 and even a 3, if you have a lot of definition in your head or ajna, research might be part of your surrender. But oftentimes we're overly calculating how to try to figure out our next step, resisting what our guidance is coming from our higher self, saying, I don't know if I can trust that, so let me just do a bit more research or a bit more asking other people what they think. And what we really want to do is just be surrendered, let go of all that need to have it figured all out, and go into the higher self. What is the higher self asking you towards? And if there's more research required, or if you're being called to consult more people, your higher self will call you to that. But often, your higher self is actually calling you to research a bit less. Trust that you already know. You already have the answers inside of you. You have the answers inside of you that are in highest service to you. And you don't need to always be going out there and consulting the opinions of others, the history of the past, to be guided forward in alignment. And I like to call it a surrender experiment because surrendering is easy to say. It's easy for me to talk about it right now, and it can be very challenging in the moment to actually do it. Because maybe we're in a moment of chaos, we're in a moment of pain, we're in a moment of uncertainty. So we're all up in our head. We're in that fear response. Maybe our mind is racing, we're calculating, we're nervous, we're on edge, we're overwhelmed. So when we call it an experiment, it takes off the pressure to have it all figured out. So we're always being led by the higher self and we're never up in our head. It's just a light, spacious, curious experiment. It is easeful, it is spacious. I wonder what would happen if I followed the nudges of my heart, of my higher self. It is a surrender experiment. And when you get into that mindset of, hey, look, this is only an experiment. I'm going to see what it feels like to be completely led by my higher self for a while. It's for a period of time. Now, certainly we are evolving to always wanting to be led by the higher self. We are evolving to that 100% led by the higher self. But we're not there yet. We have more learning and healing and evolution to do before, for most of us anyway, to get to that point where we're 100% led by the higher self. So as a way to bridge that gap and to help us get to that point where we're really, really led mostly by our higher self, it's helpful to have these ways of looking at it, these reframes where we can just say to ourselves, look, it's okay. It's just a surrender experiment. I'm going to try it for a while to see how it goes. So when is it time to kick one off? When your life is in a bit of a chaos. When there's chaos in our collective experience. Something very difficult or challenging is happening to the collective. You know, the pandemic. That was a shock to the collective, right? That was a shock for all of us. It slowed us all down in our tracks, and we had to completely rethink about how we lived and connected to each other, and it changed so much, right? And there's certain things that the pandemic changed forever, right? And that will happen, that those shocks in our outer world that affect all of us. And some of us will feel a greater shock to it than others. There's always going to be difficult weather and difficult weather events. And it's scary to us all. But if you're living in the place that is experiencing the flood or the hurricane or the storm, obviously it's going to affect you more. And then certainly there are the shocks and the chaos we have in our own lives. Something's happening to our children. There's a health scare. There's a death of a loved one. It's a shock. It's a chaos. Maybe we're trying really hard to make money in our business and we just don't feel like we can. And then all of a sudden we're having one of those dark nights of the soul and we're like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? Why am I putting in all this effort? I feel like giving up. So you want to notice those points in life where life feels chaotic. You feel overwhelmed. You feel like giving up. You feel lots of fear, lots of uncertainty, lots of instability. You feel a shock in your life, in the world. Okay, then you can say, you know, for the next day, for the next week, for the next undetermined period of time, I'm going to go into a surrender experiment and be solely led by the voice of my higher self. I'm going to surrender everything in my life, in my work, over to my higher self. Now, that's again an easy thing to say, but it's actually pretty challenging to do in practice because we are such creatures of habit, and there's so much of our experience that's just sort of on an auto function, and those voices in our head can be really powerful. So it's okay if you kick off a surrender experiment and you're noticing that it's really difficult to be completely led by the higher self. It's not really meant to be a 100% led by the higher self, but it's just, I am going to, with mindful intention, try to delegate more and more of the questions of my day, more of the next best steps to my higher self. It's like I'm living more and more of my day from my heart instead of my head. That is the surrender experiment. And we can't do that. We can't kick off a surrender experiment unless we start with first releasing that blocked energy. It always starts with the healing. Because if we don't release the blocked energy, that blocked energy will have a grip on us, keeping us in our head and making it very difficult for us to access our heart. And then we'll beat ourselves up because we're not accessing the heart, and it'll make us all feel worse. So what we want to do instead is start with releasing blocked energy. And we do that by identifying a painful thought or story we might be telling ourselves consciously or even subconsciously. See if you can really dig it up from deep inside. What am I telling myself that's triggering this pain and that's cutting me off from my higher self? Once you identify a thought, and if you're not sure, go with your best guess. You want to feel the feels that are triggered when the thought feels true. Spend 60 to 90 seconds fully and completely feeling all those feels, all those physical sensations. And this is a process that I teach you how to do in detail in Soul Blueprint. Soul Blueprint is my signature certification program that teaches you how to connect to and co-create with your higher self and the divine at higher and higher, more elevated, more sophisticated levels. So if you're interested in learning more about that, there's a link in the show notes where you can enroll if enrollment is open for the next cohort, or you can join the Soul List, which is the bonus-filled waiting list, which will let you know when the next cohort is open for enrollment. So we're releasing the blocks first. Then once you feel the feels, release the blocks, take some deep breaths, set the intention. I intend to initiate a surrender experiment. I am ready to surrender to the next level wherever I am, whether I'm only a little bit surrendered or very surrendered, I'm gonna take it to the next level. I'm gonna honor where I am and then push my limits a little bit to take it to the next level. I intend to kick off a surrender experiment. That's all you have to say. Then you want to take a few deep breaths and connect to your heart space at the center of your chest. And from the heart space, you're going to connect to your higher self. And once you connect to higher self, and if you're not sure, don't worry, the energy knows where to go. All you have to do is set the intentions. And you're going to ask your higher self, which is like asking your heart. Ask your heart, higher self, now what? That is the surrender question. You're not having to have it all figured out. You don't need to know what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next year. That is not a component of the surrender experiment, having our future all figured out. It's about surrendering to the present. That is the essence of the surrender experiment. Higher self, now what? And this is super important, which is why you're very smart to listen to the end of my podcasts, because so often with my episodes, I get to the juiciest nuggets right towards the end, or the most important things, and I am in a flow state. I am in a quasi channel state whenever I'm recording a podcast episode. So it comes out this way. And the important thing I want to say to you now is, you don't have to be in a time of chaos in your life to kick off a surrender experiment. It can be any time you're feeling called to deepen your connection to your higher self and live more from the heart. So let's go ahead and kick one off right now together. Say it with me aloud. I intend to kick off a surrender experiment. Now, we want to feel the feels, breathe, release for any sort of blocked energy that might be there. So if I'm in a pretty high vibe place, but you can always call up some blocked energy that's hiding in your energy system. So if I were to call up some blocked energy that's hiding in my energy system, what would it be telling me? Yeah, I'm just picking up that I have a pretty busy work week this week. And I'm just getting the message like, you packed too much in again, Allison. And even though that's not really true, like I actually feel really in a flow state about my agenda, but I think this is like old baggage coming up telling me that I'm packing too much in, because I actually didn't. But I have this story that's telling me I did. And so that's triggering some low vibrational energy of fatigue and overwhelm and even annoyance at myself. So I'm going to go ahead and imagine that thought is super true. I packed too much in this week. And then I'm going to feel the feels that are triggered when the thought feels true. So I invite you to do that for yourself. And you're just going to feel the physical sensations, feel the tactile sensations when the thought feels true. And you can hit pause here if you need a second to feel the feels. And then you're going to wait till the emotional intensity starts to go down. And then you're going to return to deep breaths, big inhales, big exhales. Connect to your heart space, sink into your body. From your heart energy, connect to your higher self and ask your higher self, now what? And when I ask my higher self that, I'm getting the message when this episode is over, which it almost is, I need to do my daily journaling, which I do every single morning, but I didn't do it this morning because we had some contractors coming over unusually to do some work very early. So they kind of cut into my morning routine, which is actually a really good example. Like, this isn't a chaos in my life. However, this is a little example of how my everyday routine got disrupted and I didn't do an important spiritual practice for me and my energy. And because I engaged in this surrender experiment, my higher self just is gently reminding me not to skip it, even though I'm out of my daily routine, that I should not skip this important practice and I should do it now. So this is a beautiful example of how a surrender experiment can really get you back in alignment when you're feeling disruptions in your life in minor ways, which we do every day, right? No day is ever perfectly goes as planned and is perfect in flow. And then we really want to rely on the surrender experiments when life really throws us a curveball, and either it's in our personal life or it's an event that's shocking the collective and we're feeling overwhelmed, feeling like giving up, and we don't need to have it all figured out. We don't really need to know what tomorrow's going to bring. All we need to know is what to be focused on in this now, in this present moment, which is the only true moment there is, guided by the voice of our higher self, by our heart, and just listening for the answer, what we perceive to receive from the question, higher self, now what? My invitation for you this week is to go ahead and kick off a surrender experiment. Start with the intention. Notice if you need to feel the feels, breathe, release to release any blocked energy. Connect to the higher self and ask your higher self, now what? And really be in that constant connection more than you normally are of that higher self, now what? Being guided forward to your next best step by the heart. All right, that's a wrap for this week. I hope you really, really received so much. And if you did, please, please, please grab your phone, go to the app where you listen, and click on leave a review. If you listen from my website, scroll down in the show notes to leave a podcast review. You will be taken to 4 different platforms where you can leave a review. And of course, I will read your amazing high vibe words on the air. And as always, until next time, may your soul guide the way.